Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about chapter 5 and 6 of Hold On to Your Kids by Gordon Neufeld and Gabor Mate. Um, in chapter 5, he starts out by saying Seinfeld said his son looked him directly in the eye while he pooped his pants. That would be weird if that happened with anybody other than your child, obviously. And he says what keeps us committed as a parent to parent is attachment. Without attachment, parenting would just be work. Um, Anybody who has worked or who has babysat somebody else's child knows it's a lot harder to change someone else's diaper. Seems to smell a lot worse than your own child's. Attachment makes it possible for us to handle changing stinky diapers, lack of sleep, crying, and the lack of appreciation and sometimes annoying behavior. There are 7 ways in which attachment supports parenting. The first one is attachment arranges the parent and child hierarchically in a hierarchy. Um, Gordon Neufeld says that all relationships are hierarchical. Wow, I have a hard time with that word. A child is receptive to being taken care of if they experience themselves as being in the dependent mode. Adult relationships usually shift back and forth of who is in the caretaker role. It's interesting to think about that because I always thought relationships with adults should be like a true partnership, but when you think about it, there are definitely times when you want to be taken care of, and there are times when you do the taking care of your partners. So it does shift back and forth, which I guess is the healthy way, as long as you're not doing all the taking care of, or somebody else is just taking care of you, or the taking care of turns into a controlling. So should be like a positive taking care of. Um, with peer orientation, dominance and submission set up unhealthy situations. If a domineering child is compassionate and resumes responsibility for others, he or she will be nurturing and caregiving. If the child is frustrated, aggressive, and self centered, we have the making of a bully. So, I guess, like with all relationships, you want that person who is in the lead role to be a person who comes with a good motivation to be nurturing, and that's more likely from an adult than from another child. If in a parent child relationship, when the natural hierarchy has changed, sometimes parents instinctively feel like putting their children back in their place, usually by showing them who's boss in an authoritarian way. Instead, what needs to happen is for the relationship to get back on track. Otherwise, with punishments, you damage the relationship more. Peer orientation is not the way attachment order can become inverted. Oh, peer orientation is not the only way attachment order can become inverted. Some parents rely on their parents as confidants, complaining to their children about problems with their spouse, for example. Instead of being able to confide in their parents with their difficulties, children learn to suppress their needs to support the parent. And of course, it should be the other way around. You're the one in charge. You're the one whose job it is to take care of your child, not the other way around. Um, so another way that attachment can support parenting is the second one. Attachment evokes the parenting instincts, makes the child more endearing, and increases parental tolerance. There's nothing more appealing than the attachment behavior of an infant. When infants smile at you and stretch out their arms to want to be picked up or held, it's hard to resist for anybody. I've noticed it at work lots of times. Even kids who are really kind of wild, when they come up to an infant, they usually slow right down and they know to be gentle, and it's just a beautiful thing to see. Um, the charming behavior of an infant as they get older, sometimes they're not quite as charming anymore. But all children do little automatic things to draw on our attachment. It's not to be manipulative or anything, it's just natural. They do things so that we stay attached to them. When there's peer attachment and children aren't friendly towards us anymore, we have to rely on our love and commitment, which can feel a lot less rewarding. We'll still love them, of course, but if they're not as attached to us anymore and they're repelling us, and they're showing us in their behavior, that can be very challenging for parents. Um, it becomes hard to take. So, for example, a mother cat is usually tolerant with her kittens crawling all over her, maybe biting and scratching. But if another kitten gets introduced that's not hers, she's not going to have the same tolerance level unless she becomes attached to the new kitten, and then again, she'll accept it. Um, of course, like humans are more complex than cats, but it is similar for us as well, that attachment makes us more tolerant. Um, and what makes it worth our while is that because of attachment, they show us affection and the sign of connection, the desire for closeness. And they don't do it out of appreciation. They just do it out of attachment. Children generally have no idea what impact they have on us, how they can sometimes hurt us, and or the sacrifices we make for them. They shouldn't be aware of that. It's good that they don't know, because we should just do that for them because we want to, and not like rub it in and make them feel bad about it. They should just be aware of that eventually when they're mature and maybe they have kids on their own, and then suddenly realize, my parents did a lot of things for me. Um, but yeah, like we don't do it to be appreciated by our kids. We just do it because we love them and we're attached to them. But yeah, when the attachment doesn't work anymore, those feelings, because it becomes a lot more difficult. Feelings can become chilled. The power of attachment can backfire when children are peer oriented. Um, Parents are often surprised how much their peer oriented children will put up from their peers when they don't put up from like anything from you, like you can't even breathe right. but suddenly with their peers they'll do all kinds of things. So that's part of peer attachment. um, then the next way that parenting becomes easier through attachment is attachment commands the child's attention. Getting a child to look at us and to listen to us is fundamental in parenting. Nobody can command the attention of somebody else. You can't just like force somebody to pay attention to you, because the brain assigns priority to what to pay attention to. So if the child is hungry or alarmed, attention will be diverted naturally. The stronger the attachment, the easier it is to secure the child's attention. Um, peer, orienta- Peer orientation creates deficits in the child's attention. So Gordon Neufeld says it's no accident that the diagnosis for ADD went up as peer orientation went up. There can be different causes for ADD for sure, but peer orientation can be one of them. And deficits in attachment to adults contribute significantly to deficits in attention to adults. If attachment is disoriented, um, attention will be disoriented too. So that's also interesting for teachers. So it's important that teachers have a strong attachment with the children that they're trying to teach, because the better your attachment to them, the more attention they'll naturally pay to you. If you think about that with your own teachers, who you like to pay attention to, it's the teachers that you've felt attached to. Then number four, the fourth way that makes parenting easier through attachment is that attachment keeps the child close to the parents. Attachment serves as an invisible leash. Sometimes that makes us feel suffocated when we can't even close a bathroom door. A lot of you can relate to that. But it also gives us great freedom. That's an interesting way to think about that when you're in the midst of your child wanting to be around you all the time. Mama, 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 you can never get away. It gives you the freedom that you don't have to chase them down all the time. They'll be right close to you. So it can be annoying when we crave separation, like to go to work, to go to sleep, or we need a little break. But on the other hand, if children aren't properly attached to us, it's a nightmare to keep track of them. So we should be thankful for the assistance we get from attachment to keep our children close. Best not to fight against the way we were designed by nature. If all goes well, the drive for physical proximity with the parent gradually evolves into a need for emotional connection and contact. So the urge to keep the parent in sight changes into the need to know where the parent is. Even adolescents, when there's good attachment, they want to know where's mom or when is dad coming home. And they'll also be anxious if they don't know how to get in touch. On the other hand, if a child is peer oriented, they will seek closeness with peers in person or using technology. And when it becomes an overwhelming drive, it can interfere with family life, work, or time for solitude, which is important too. So, in the fifth way attachment makes parenting easier is attachment creates a model out of the parent. Adults are often surprised when children in their care don't follow their lead in how to conduct themselves and live their lives. A child accepts as his models only those to whom he or she is strongly attached to. By copying who the child is attached to, they maintain psychological closeness. The desire for sameness leads to spontaneous learning experiences. For example, language, we learn it automatically through wanting to copy our parents. So that's why it doesn't turn into work or anything for us. It's just something we learn automatically because we're attached to our parents, so we want to be like them, so we learn from them. If when you're older you want to learn another language, Gordon Neufeld says it becomes a lot easier if you fall in love with your teacher. You can imagine that would be helpful and be a good motivator. So as parents and teachers rely on attachment to make models out of us. When peers replace parents as the dominant attachment figure, they become the child's model. Then they learn from their peers, and what they learn is out of our control, and it's not always going to be things we like. And also, it'll be harder for them to take cues from us. They're not going to want to learn from us. They're going to want to learn from their peers when they're peer attached. So yeah, so you have less control and you might not like what they're learning. The sixth way of attachment making parenting easier is attachment designates the parent as the primary cue giver. One of the fundamental tasks for parents is to provide direction and guidance to our children. Until the child becomes capable of self-direction and of following cues from within, they will need us to show them the way. A lot of parent experts assume if your children don't follow your cues, it's because you need to make your instructions more clear. Be clear in your expectations, setting well-defined and reasonable limits, articulate the rules, being consistent about consequences, and avoiding mixed messages. All of that might be helpful, but you need attachment as a foundation for any of it to work, or your child won't follow your lead. If a child's attachment brain is oriented to the parent, they will take cues by watching the parent's face, the parent's reaction, and the parent's values, communications, and gestures. I often see this at playgroup where the child, before they do something, they look over at the parent and check in with their reaction to see if it's okay. And that's how it should be. And I mean, they might still do things that they shouldn't do, but they should check in with you and, make sure you're watching and everything's okay. Attachment makes it easy to give directions, sometimes too easy. When we're not at our best and behaviors speak in ways we're not proud of, we may wish that our children would not follow our lead quite so automatically and accurately. I'm sure all of us have experienced that, where our children copy us, or something comes out of their mouths that you know you've said, and it's kind of embarrassing. so, so watch what example you're setting. But at least as adults, we can reflect on our actions and we can repair the damage we've done. And we know we've done something wrong when we've done something wrong. But it's a lot of power in the hands of peers. So if your child is peer oriented and they're copying them and it has a bad result, their friends might not care about that or feel responsible for that. So they don't realize how much power they have and what negative impact they can have. So it's best they're solidly attached to you. Some parents may avoid giving direction, wanting to leave room for the child to develop their own internal guides. Only psychological maturity can grant self-determination. So you can't force or rush maturity. It takes time. And in the meantime, your child needs your guidance. In the absence of parental direction, children will find other, often inferior substitutes. So be sure to be there to give them the direction that they need or help guide them through situations. Managing a child who's not following directions is difficult enough, but trying to control a child who's under someone else's command is next to impossible. What was meant to replace us eventually is maturity. A grown-up person's own capacity to make decisions and to choose the best course of action. Alrighty. And number 7, the last way attachment makes it easier to parent is attachment makes the child want to be good for the parent. If you have a dog, you know it wants to listen to you. For the most part, just like children, they want to, but they don't always manage to do the right thing. But the desire is there. So people are more complex, but the scenario is similar. Parenting is a lot easier if they want to please you, for the most part, like I said, wanting to please you. It's not like they always succeed, but they want to. What you want to see is an underlying desire from the child to please the parents. Sometimes parents have unrealistically high expectations of their children that they can't possibly live up to. So keep your child's development in mind. But the desire is hopefully there. Being good is less of a personality trait than a result of attachment. So if your child seems bad, rather than punishing them, work on the relationship. There is an attachment conscience, a sort of alarm that warns against conduct that would trigger the parent's disfavor. The essence of attachment conscience is separation anxiety. It's beneficial for a child to feel bad when anticipating a loss of connection. If we exploit this to get children to listen by making them feel bad, guilty, or ashamed, it can cause them to shut down. The short-term gain is not worth the long-term damage. When a child wants the approval of peers instead of parents, the motivation to be good for parents drops significantly. If the values of the peers differ significantly from those of the parents, the child's behavior will also change accordingly. Children don't internalize values until they're adolescents. Therefore, the changes in behavior don't mean that their values have changed. It means that their attachment has changed, and therefore who they take their cues from. So it's not that they have a totally different belief system suddenly. They haven't internalized the belief system yet. But they, instead of taking their cues from you, they're taking them from someone else now. Sometimes it seems like children are purposefully pushing our buttons. When a child is peer-oriented, it's an instinct to try and please who they're attached to and repel the people they're not attached to. So saying, "You made me so proud," to a peer-attached child can actually backfire. That's kind of sad. But yeah, so sometimes you mean really well, but the child is so against everything you say that it might backfire saying even nice things like that. The child's desire to be good for a parent is a powerful motivator if it requires careful, nurturing, and trust. It's a violation of the relationship not to believe in the child's desire to be good when it actually exists. Accusing a child of bad intentions can trigger defenses in the child, harm the relationship, and make them feel like being bad. It's also too risky for the child to continue to want to be good for a parent or a teacher who doesn't believe in them. External motivation like rewards and punishment may destroy internal motivation. For example, if we reward for reading, children get the message that reading isn't fun actually. It sends the message to read shorter books, get more rewards, and to not read for fun. So that's kind of interesting. Like, we think it would be the other way around, but if you think about, like, they just do what makes sense for them to get the reward then, and don't want to do the action just for the sake of the action. If the desire to be good for us is not treasured and nurtured, the child will lose his motivation to keep trying to measure up. Children's desire to be good for us warrants our trust, not their ability to perform for our expectations. So, yeah, give that some thought. I think that's really interesting, that it's the desire to be good that is the important thing. They're not always going to manage it, just like we don't always manage it. Like, we have good intentions, but we don't always manage to follow through on them. Doesn't mean we're bad people. It means we have difficulty with some of the follow through because it's difficult. So give your children credit for wanting to be good. That's the most important thing, and help them. This is thanks for listening. That was chapter 5. I'm gonna separate the two because that one was a really long chapter, and I'm gonna do a separate recording for chapter 6.